Hello, Writer's Workout friends. I'm so excited to talk to you today about AI and the many ethical dilemmas it has posed for creators. My name is Sarah Bailey. This is the first part of a two-part presentation. What I'll be covering in this presentation is the spectrum of attitudes that I see people taking toward AI. We'll do a quick breakdown of what AI is and the ethical issues surrounding it. We'll explore how AI is affecting the writing and publishing industry, and I will also be giving you a list of resources for reliable AI-related information. So, a little bit about me. Again, my name is Sarah Bailey. I'm a freelance book editor. I do developmental editing, line and copy editing, and proofreading of both fiction and nonfiction. And I like to think of myself as an AI curious individual. I've definitely been a little bit more fearful of it in the past. I've been reluctant to use it. I've been unsure whether it's even illegal for me to use it in a lot of cases, but now I'm trying to figure it out and approach it from more of a curious perspective rather than a fearful one. And I'm still very much experimenting. I have not yet figured out how it best works for me. But one of my favorite things that I have collaborated with AI on is figuring out a better diet for my dog. I wasn't feeling good about just feeding him kibble, and I wanted to know what I could add from my own kitchen into his diet and how much. And it was really remarkable how the AI that I used helped me come up with ingredients to add and the best ways to add them in and how much to add. It was really cool to figure out something that would normally take me days of research on Google, but to have all of those resources condensed into something that I could talk to and work it out with. So that was a cool experience. So in my own internet perusings, I've seen a lot of different attitudes on AI. I'm sure you have too. On one hand of the spectrum, and this is maybe something we don't see necessarily paraded, but I think it's definitely there. It's more of a anything goes perspective, and it makes us money, so that's all that we need to know about it, is it can help us make money and do more faster. There are people who ignore the ethical issues, who look at the copyright violations and just say, it doesn't matter that much, or some people will say that they've written something and really it was AI that wrote it completely. Obviously, that is not okay. And others who, even worse, use AI to misinform or even scam people. There were definitely scammers before, but AI is a powerful tool and they are definitely using it to their advantage. And then we have another side of the spectrum where people are very fearful. They worry it's going to take their jobs and that they won't have sources of income in the future. There are people who are in denial about how much of a game changer AI really is. And there are also people who don't want anyone to do anything with AI. They want to put it back in the box and say we don't need this, and this is making things worse, and it can never be ethical, so we should never use it. And anyone who uses it is an awful human being. I've seen a lot of those those people commenting on social media posts with that attitude. And there's also, to very closely related, I like to call the pearl clutchers, those who feel like any use of AI in any creative process, the output is automatically tainted. Whatever the creator makes is sullied by any sort of AI involvement. And or they'll call people who use AI lazy, or and that's not true. And if you find yourselves on anywhere on this spectrum or on the spectrum previously, I hope that this presentation will pull you a little bit closer to the middle. It's really completely human behavior to be wary of and even fear new technology that has such potential to change the world. That's happened with many technological advancements. And with this specifically, it's okay to worry that maybe AI will eventually replace you at your job. It's okay to be angry that there have been so many ethical missteps in its creation, and there are so many unknowns for how far this technology will reach into our lives. But rather than letting our actions be determined by emotional extremes, I believe it's better to take the time to learn more about AI and its potential to aid us in our day-to-day efforts, including our creative work. We can still be cautious, but that doesn't mean we are completely closing ourselves off from AI. We can be curious, we can step back and learn, we can pay attention to how things unfold for a while before forming a firm judgment. We can also be open to the possibilities the AI has introduced and to the idea of it becoming a key part of our daily functioning, including creativity. We can start experimenting with AI, understanding that, as with any new form of technology, it may take some time for us to master it and successfully adapt it to our processes and needs. So before I move on, I think it's useful to pause and just clarify what we mean when we say AI and what we're talking about, because there are different kinds of AI. There's generative AI, which is trained on large amounts of data to form original responses and learn from new info and from interactions. Large language models are a type of generative AI. So you think of ChatGPT, that's a large language model. And we have non-generative AI, which instead of pulling from basically every sort of database and type of information to create new or human-like responses, instead non-generative AI analyzes specific sets of existing data to predict and find patterns. But it is, when we are talking about AI, both in this presentation and when you are reading about it and talking about it, generally people are concerned about generative AI. And so throughout this presentation, as I'm using the term AI, I'm specifically talking about generative AI. I also wanted to say quickly, there's some different terms for both of these AIs that might be useful for you to know. Generative AI also goes by it's called hard AI. And then non-generative AI can also be called soft AI, traditional, predictive, discriminative, or even general AI. So I think that's useful to just be familiar with all the terms. But I feel like in general, when people just use AI, for the most part, they're talking about generative AI right now. So these are the most commonly used AI tools or programs. On the non-generative side, we have Grammarly, Marlowe, Hemingway, and Pro Writing Aid. Marlowe is specifically geared toward developmental style editing of fiction, and Grammarly, Hemingway, and Pro Writing Aid are specifically analyzing language and grammar. how effective the writing is more on a sentence level. And I have an asterisk here because a lot of these tools are starting to incorporate generative AI in certain features. But you can usually opt out of them for now if you are willing to do a little bit of poking around on your settings. But I don't know if that will always be the case. So that is worth keeping in mind. And then when we're talking about generative AI, the programs that we see people using the most is ChatGPT, which is created by OpenAI. We have Claude, which is created by Anthropic, and Claude is known for its more ethical practices when it comes to user data and its AI output. So that's worth noting. There's Perplexity, which is also known for its research capabilities, and Gemini, which was formerly known as Google Bard. So briefly, the issues at hand for AI are copyright infringement. Obviously, these models were all trained on materials that were obtained without consent from the content of the internet at large. And this is still the site of many court cases and legal battles. But it seems like the bulk of ethical focus right now is on preventing it in the future. For example, we have there are big publishers who are partnering with AI to allow companies to use the works that they publish to train their AI models, but they offer compensation to authors, or they offer authors a way to opt out. There's the copyright eligibility issue. If you have created something with the assistance of AI, can you copyright it? That's a tricky question, and that's what a lot of that's another legal thing that is being hashed out right now, and I will be addressing this more and how you can navigate copyright issues as an author in part 2. There's also the problem of AI bias. AI has been known to produce responses that are biased against non-dominant groups, and that's a problem. And we don't want to be putting any discriminatory content out there in our work. But so if we're not careful, that is absolutely an issue that can crop up. There's also the environmental concerns. It's kind of a hidden problem, hidden from us where we are, but the reality is that they have massive centers where all this data is being stored and processed, and they're not great for the environment. It's using a lot of resources and contributing to climate issues. And then there are labor concerns. People who have been training AI, because we've had to have people prompt shaping AI and helping it learn, and a lot of the time these people have to watch awful content so that they can teach AI, this is bad, we don't want to perpetuate this, we don't want to put more of this out there. But and there's been a lot of mental health consequences for those people who have had to, and often they're in countries where they're not paid very much, and they're not offered a lot of labor support. So there's definitely some big concerns on all levels of AI use. So thinking about our industry specifically, writing and publishing, there's some good stuff going on. We have organizations like the Authors Guild and ALLI, the Alliance for Independent Authors. They're helping authors learn how to use AI ethically. And the Authors Guild in particular is right at the front of the fray for advocating for better usage of AI and remedying the problems that it has already caused. There are organizations like Fairly Trained, which Authors Guild supports. And that organization is creating pathways for AI developers to certify that their AI has been trained ethically and that it can be used ethically. That's, as far as I could tell when I was looking at Fairly Trained, it's still newer, and there aren't a lot of LLMs that are on that have been certified by Fairly Trained yet, but I imagine that is something that will continue to develop over time. And like I mentioned previously, major publishers are starting to contract with AI developers so that authors can be compensated. We can argue about whether that compensation is enough, or whether it's, you can always find something to debate. But I feel like that's a good step forward, that publishers are recognizing that we can't just have AI scraping books and paywalled publications without compensation. So there's also some not so great stuff happening related to AI in our industry. Like I talked about before, scammers are having a party, creating book spam, filling up places like Amazon with junk that nobody really wants to buy, but a lot of people don't know what it is until after they've bought it. There's also been a big problem with reverse plagiarism, where particularly around new book releases, they will quickly create their own, something that they can sell that has a similar title or is even attributed to the author that you're wanting to buy the book from, and essentially scamming you into buying something that is just AI generated garbage. Sometimes it doesn't even make sense. Sometimes it's just garble. And Amazon seems to be struggling to moderate or prevent AI spam, which results in sales stolen from authors. And it also creates reputational challenges for authors. If you want to learn more about this kind of issue, there was a really prominent author who this happened to, and I recommend you look it up. It was Jane Friedman. This happened to her, I think, either last year or the year before, and that was very, very interesting to see her reaction and sort of watch that unfold. So there's also a lot of uncharted stuff going on. We don't know if it's going to be good or bad because it's too early to tell. Some publishing houses are using AI in their processes, everything from editing, weeding through the slush pile, editing and marketing, and all kinds of things that they're trying to streamline. And there's also more writers being assisted by AI, and that's still really new. And I feel, like, while I'm on the more hopeful side of things, I also feel like it's, we have to see how this plays out, and where writing and publishing kind of lands with this growing movement of AI-assisted authors. And then there's also the copyright law and intellectual property issues I mentioned before. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's in the air for a long time to come. Who knows how long it's going to take for governments and courts to decide exactly how we should be navigating these. And we might not know for a while. So I've just thrown a lot of information at you, and before I go on, I just want to pause and say, in the words of my friend LeVar Burton, don't take my word for it. you can learn about these things for yourself, and I highly encourage you to do that. There are many, many, many places that you can learn for yourself and form your own opinions on generative AI. Um, and it's easy to let opinions be formed by what we read in social media comment sections. I've definitely been guilty of that. It's easy to just believe what we read online. And it's worth taking the time, though, to learn from high quality sources and from industry professionals who have really spent significant time and energy researching these developments and issues. And so here are some of those people and resources. I've also included this in the handout, which there will be a QR code to scan at the end. I mentioned Jane Friedman earlier. She is one of the foremost experts on the writing and publishing industry. Joanna Penn has really been very public about her journey into becoming an AI assisted author, and she's doing well. Her books are selling, and she has really interesting perspectives on how this can be used to enhance the creative process rather than use it as a way to be, lazy. There's also, as I mentioned, the Authors Guild. I'd say that they're on the more cautious side of how they think about AI. But that's good. I think it's healthy to have a good dose of caution about these things. And they also aren't afraid to ask companies to hold themselves to higher standards, which I think is really important. There's also the Alliance of Independent Authors, which I also mentioned before. They have great resources for thinking about how we as authors can use these tools ethically, and that's something I'll also be talking about more in the next presentation. There's also Erin Survey. She's very prominent right now in the editing space. If you are an editor, or you're just really curious to learn more about the editing capabilities of AI, she has two great courses that I would recommend looking into. And then we have Amy Frusher Kelly. She has been very vocal on how AI should be used in an ethical way, and where we should be drawing our boundaries. And we also have, good publications. We have podcasts, Hard Fork, the AI Daily Brief. We have one of my favorite newsletters is AI Side Quest by Mignon Fogarty, also known as the Grammar Girl. That is a highly, highly recommend subscribing to that newsletter. It's free, and you can look through back issues as well. And there's also the Creative Pen blog collection, which is by Joanna Penn. She's written a whole series of posts about using AI in our creative work. So that brings us to a really big question. Now that we've broken down the ethical problems that AI has presented us, and also some of the interesting things it can do for us, it leads us to ask, is it ever ethical to use any sort of generative AI in our creative work? And for some people, the answer will always be no. And that's okay. Some people won't want to support tools that are wreaking havoc physically and morally around the world. And that's okay, but their frustration will be reduced, I feel, if they can understand that continuing with old technologies and processes will come at a cost, and that they will need to make their own adaptations, whether that is eventually using AI in some way, or whether that's adapting their businesses and their approaches in a way that helps them stay relevant in a market that is going to increasingly rely on AI. Um, and and for the rest of us, for those that are interested in using AI and figuring out how to do this in a way that will still allow us to sleep at night, I think it's better to ask a different question. Since AI is here and it's not going away, how can I use it ethically? And that's okay too. It's okay to be on either side of this spectrum here. If you decide that with all of the combined ethical problems going on, the environment and the labor issues and the copyright issues and the internet scraping and some people will decide that no, they can't, they don't want to deal with that. They don't want to touch something that has had such dirty origins. And I think what's key here is allowing that both viewpoints are valid. And before I close out this presentation, I think it's important to end on a perspective of someone who has been studying this much more than I have, from Jane Friedman. She really is one of my heroes. She wrote in an article recently, increasingly, I'm pushing back on the question, what do you need protecting from? While the AI companies will always carry the original sin of training on copyrighted work without permission or licensing, they're now going through appropriate channels to obtain training material. Yes, there are lawsuits underway by the New York Times and the Authors Guild, among others, that have to play out and may settle out of court. But even if the rights holders win in the end, the models will not shut down. The AI companies will not go out of business. Instead, remedies will be found for rights holders and business will continue as usual. And I think it's important to extend this to the other ethical issues presented by AI. If we want to keep abreast of the AI wave that has already started, we do need to become confident users, while also supporting initiatives like Fairly Trained and organizations like the Authors Guild, who are working to remedy or at least put an end to the current unethical practices the AI has relied on, including things like labor concerns and environment concerns. And that brings me to my end of this presentation. If you have more AI-related questions, don't forget to watch my second presentation on using AI ethically in a writing practice. There's a QR code to scan for the presentation handout. The handout is the same for both part 1 and part 2. And here's how to contact me. There's my email, sarah.molloy.bailey@gmail.com. You can also find me at baileyediting.com. And thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in part 2.